Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. On today's podcast we have a really special guest with us. Her name is Natalie Dobkins. She is a dog trainer with over 50,000 followers on her Instagram and YouTube. She has been using her platform to educate owners on how to appropriately use training tools, as well as how to go into a more balanced approach of dog training. So we're really happy that she's here with us today, and why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey guys, I am so excited to be here today. My name is Natalie Dobkins, and I am the head trainer and the owner of Canine Performance, which I am all focused on dog training and education, primarily a lot of education. Just like she already mentioned, I want to educate people on balance training tools and how to live the best life possible with their dog. And usually that means training other people how to be the dog trainer for their own dog.
Yeah, awesome. Just to give some people context, one of the things that really drew me to you was your use of training tools, like you had mentioned before. And I have personally dealt with a bit of an extreme when it comes to training dogs with my personal dogs. So I've seen what like just positive reinforcement alone does, what just using training tools does. So what I liked about you is that you were very open about talking about how to use training tools, and I discovered you at a time that when I first started training my dog with an e-collar, it wasn't very accepted, and people weren't very open to it, just because they had preconceived notions, or they were just ignorant to how these training tools can be used. So yeah, I mean, that's how I came across your channel. So I just want to give people context, and I was really happy to see somebody like you using your platform just to teach people.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And I think that that's before I got into the dog industry, that was actually something it was funny. It's funny that you say that, because when I first started, I had a couple of mentors, and they had really big accounts at the time. And they were like, if there's one thing that you should never do, don't ever talk about training tools. You're just going to stir up drama and all these other things. I was like, oh yeah, when I start my business, like I'm so scared of doing that. And for a while, I didn't talk about training tools at all. And then when I finally did, there was such a overwhelmingly positive response. There was a pretty big negative response as well. But from the people that did reach out to me, and they're like, wow, thank you so much for sharing this. I was like, oh, you know what? Like, people in this industry have really abdicated the responsibility of giving proper education and knowledge about these different tools. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to pick up this responsibility that has been set down, and I'm going to make that my mission. And so here we are, several years later.
And yeah, I think it's really important that you said that, because I think that there was a really big stigma around e-collars for a long time, and prong collars, and there still is. But I feel like because social media has advanced a lot, people are more aware of it now, and it's not seen as something so negative. So I don't know, I think you were, at least for me, you were one of the first people that I saw that was using these training tools. So very, very cool. But I did want to go into our first question. So I think everybody wants to know, how did you get started in your career? And was there a moment that it clicked for you, that you were like, yes, this is what I want to do, dog training is what I want to pursue?
Really good question. I think that my story into dog training is very similar to other dog trainers. However, my story into having my own company is very unique to myself. So here's what I mean by that is, so I myself had two dogs that I could not control. So for those of you that are just listening to this and you can't see me, I'm like a very tiny woman. I'm 5'1". I weigh like 116 pounds, and I had a 75-pound Siberian German Shepherd Husky mix. And then I also had a Siberian Husky. So really big dogs. And the German Shepherd Husky, he was really leash reactive. And the Siberian Husky, she was pretty dog selective, and she could act very aggressively at times on leash. And so I was just being dragged around everywhere. And so like a lot of dog trainers, I was like, oh my gosh, like there has to be a better life than this, like we can't go anywhere. It's so embarrassing just walking down the street and, dogs just screaming and lunging at the end of the leash, and I'm literally getting dragged around. And so we sent our dogs to a board and train program, And he actually became my first mentor into the dog training space. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. And it has really close parallels into health and fitness. And I'm really into health and fitness. And so it really clicked with me. And he wasn't ready to bring on another trainer underneath him. And so I actually went and worked at a big dog training facility. It's like a national chain. I won't say the name or anything like that, but that's where I got my reps in of training dog after dog after dog, because the facility had anywhere in between 30 to 40 dogs at one point in time. And I always had 6 dogs in my rotational group, and they would be there anywhere from 1 week to 4 weeks. And so I got a lot of my reps in. And so that's how I got into dog training, but I was still working corporately part-time. So I have my bachelor's in business marketing and advertising and management. And so it just sort of really started to draw me a lot more. Everything about dog training just really made sense to me. And I just felt like I could really help people. And I think that really, it just aligned with my deep inner sense to try and make an impact in the world. And I would consider myself a pretty empathetic person. And so when I was able to do these turnover lessons when I was working at the kennel, and I was like, wow, like this is so great. Like I get to see people be so excited to actually enjoy their dog. But that didn't last for forever. And I actually ended up going back to corporate life, and I was the vice president for marketing. But when it came to being my own business owner as a dog trainer, Canine Performance actually was never supposed to be an actual company. It was supposed to be a YouTube video, and it just so happened to become a company. So the guy that I was seeing at the time, he was doing YouTube videos because he was a videographer, and he needed a prompt for a video one day. And we were like, how to start a business in one day. And so that's how it was technically actually Performance Canine started at the beginning. So that was my entrance into dog training. So I pretty much had unruly dogs, learned by training my own dogs, loved it, went and got my reps in somewhere, and then here we are 3-4 years later.
That's actually super interesting that you say that. It's really interesting that you're saying how you got your start, because he is my first dog. You can only see his body, but he had a pretty tough socialization phase. So he had a couple of negative experiences, and he is a very impressionable dog. So he became reactive to people, and that kind of took me to a whole like world of, okay, I need to find a way to address this behavior. And we did address this behavior. We went to get him trained by an Ecollar trainer, and then after that I just did my own YouTube channel. People really seemed to like it and like what I was sharing. And then I also got certified to become a dog trainer at a franchise that we will not name either. But it's so funny. I think that's so funny, because I feel like it's very similar. There's a parallel, because you're like, oh, I had really like unruly dogs, and then I was like, how do I fix it? And then I was like, oh my god, let me be a dog trainer.
Yeah.
Super interesting. Very, very neat to hear that. Okay, so next question. I know you owned a beautiful husky. Her name was Aurora. So I was wondering if she was not the first dog you trained, right?
No, she was not.
Okay, so by this time you already like had a notion of how to train your dog. So Aurora had a different version, I guess, of you, and you already trained her. And did you ever use her to help you out while training other dogs as well?
Oh, for sure. I would say that Aurora and Atlas both, they were such a big help, because when you are a dog trainer and you're bringing in dog after dog after dog into your home with very many behavioral issues, especially with reactivity, in reactivity either being fear or overexcitement and things like that, your personal dogs that you have, they become absolutely just very beneficial to helping you be a really good dog trainer, because you can't underestimate the importance of having a very neutral dog when there are other dogs that you're training and they are like freaking out at your own personal dogs, but your own personal dogs are really well trained. And so they're just like, oh yeah, like, just this dog that mom's training, totally ignore them. And that proves to be really beneficial, because then that dog that can have reactive tendencies and those types of different emotional behavioral issues, they're like, oh, that other dog doesn't do anything to me. Oh, okay, like I can learn to have a little bit of trust, or maybe my behavior doesn't give me any sort of reinforcement, so I don't find a lot of benefit in having all these reactive behaviors. So they were definitely beneficial. And she was really good at ignoring other dogs. Atlas, not so much. So I miss her. And hopefully one day I can have another dog as solid as she was.
So you do speak often about e-collar training and the importance of properly conditioning your dog to understand what it means. Have you ever dealt with clients who are completely opposed to using it after you explain it, and as a result, did you use a different training method as a substitute or anything like that?
So I'm very upfront before I take on any clients that there is a possibility that I am going to be using training tools. In fact, pretty much it's more of I operate under I am going to use these training tools, and then if I don't have to use them because the dog just simply doesn't need them, then that's totally fine. That's simply the case. And so I don't take on any clients that are opposed to using e-collars and prong collars, just because there are some people that, for example, last year, in February, I took on a client that had a very, very leash reactive golden doodle, and she was very opposed to the e-collar, and she really wanted to help her dog overcome reactivity. And I'm not saying that you must use an e-collar for these things, but when you're a dog trainer and you're on a timeline, I think that that's a lot of things that people who are not dog trainers don't fully understand, is that when you have a timeline, like I would love to be able to train a dog however the owner wants me to train them. But if you are only willing to pay for 2-week board and train, and you do not want me to use, e-collars or prong collars or anything like that, I'm not going to be able to give you the results that you want. And when your dog has a very big threshold where just even hearing a dog outside will just send your dog over the edge, like I can't take on a client like you, because I'm not going to take your money and then, not be able to provide results. So I actually don't take on clients unless they are okay with that. And if they are opposed to it, then I go through a pretty rigorous education process. And I'm not opposed to providing potential clients with a lot of free education, because at the end of the day, I want their dog to succeed and I want them to live the best life possible with their dog. So if they're like, oh no, like I don't want you to use e-collars, I'm like, okay, well, let's dive into that a little bit. Like, how much do you know about it? And then if that means I have to educate them for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, then, so be it. And even if I don't have them as a client, maybe they'll be more open to using e-collars in the future. If not with me, then maybe with someone else.
Right. So you're very upfront from the start. Like, if you're not comfortable doing this, we can't.
I'm not the trainer for you.
Yeah, and I think that that's important, because when you're starting, at least like for somebody who doesn't know anything about training their dog, there's a lot of a mindset change that has to come from the owner, because a lot of the times a dog can have a problem behavior because of something that the owner is doing. So it's really, I think it's important that you like say that from the start, like, hey, like, no, this is how we're doing it, and you're just being very sincere and honest from the beginning. In your training sessions, whether it's on YouTube or on clips on your Instagram, I've noticed that you sometimes use the e-collar for some dogs. Sometimes you just use a Herm Springer collar. Other times you do both. So, new dog owners and someone who's trying to learn how to train their dog may sometimes have a lot of confusion in picking the right training tool for their dog. So what tips would you give these owners in helping them make their choice?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Just because even I don't really know the answer to that until I start working with the dog. And even when I start working with the dog, and I start using a tool that I thought that I needed, I'm like, oh, you know what? Like maybe I don't actually really need this. Like a dog could come in and they pull really, really bad. And so, I'm like, okay, so we're gonna do some leash pressure with the Herm Springer, and then we start to use it. And then once they learn the behavior, they don't need a prong collar anymore. They just need a slip lead after that. Or heck, maybe even, a martingale or just even a flat collar as well, because they know the behavior so well. And that's, I think, something that's really challenging if you are at home and you're trying to DIY your own training, which I think that a lot of people recently have really wanted to do because dog training is expensive, and the accessibility to quality dog trainers that you know and you like and you trust isn't always there. And so I would say that, for me, I think that for the majority of dogs, they probably could benefit from a prong collar. I think that it's one of the safer tools that you can use, and the chances of you quote unquote messing your dog up is significantly less than poor e-collar work. And I think that the e-collar is very much a finishing tool, and you can accomplish a lot with the prong collar, and I think it makes you a much stronger and better dog handler or dog owner, just being able to have really good leash work. And so for people out there that are trying to determine, oh, does my dog need an e-collar? Does my dog not need an e-collar? That's a little bit more difficult to say, but I think that the majority of dogs, even if they don't have big behavioral issues or anything like that, they could probably benefit from a prong collar. I'm not sure if I answered that question like 100%, answered all facets of that question, but I think that from where I'm sitting, and the way that I understood the question, that's kind of what I would have to say about that.
No, yes, it was fine. All right, so on your business account, you have a couple of highlights dedicated to your board and trains. So just for people who don't know what that is, that's essentially when a trainer takes in a dog and boards them for a certain period of time to train them. So even though I thought that would be kind of self-explanatory, some people don't know, okay? So I just want to explain. All right, so I noticed that you do keep some of your dogs for 2 weeks, or sometimes I see like a 5-week board and train. So I'm curious to know, and I'm sure that other people are curious to know too, how do you determine how long a dog has to stay with you? Yes, so that's the question.
So it kind of depends. Oh, you kind of froze there for a second. So it depends on a couple of different factors. So before any dog comes to my board and train program, they go through a pretty lengthy consultation, and we ask a couple of key questions of what their goals are, what is their lifestyle that they ultimately see themselves having with their dog, and it's primarily indicative of, well, I would have to say it's primarily, does the dog have anxiety and reactivity? I no longer take dogs for 2 weeks if they have anxiety and reactivity, because it's such a deep emotional issue in the dog. You just can't rush something like that, and something that is so nuanced and really needs a professional hand. I just don't want to give a half-baked project back to the owner and be like, hey, your dog's not 100% all the way there, but if you do X, Y, and Z and ABC, then you can get your dog there. Because chances are, more often than not, the owner is not going to stick with it. And even if they do, they're not going to do it to the degree that you could potentially do it. So, for me, if the dog just needs some like basic obedience, like they're pretty hyperactive, they jump on people, they can't walk on a leash, sometimes they have like a little bit of selective hearing, awesome. 2-week program is really great for you. If you are, mildly leash reactive, you have some separation anxiety, you have some fears and phobias to overcome, 3-week is good for that. And if you have pretty severe leash reactivity, really bad separation anxiety, then that's where you start to get into like the 5 or 6 week zone from there. So that's usually how I determine. Now there are some dogs that I have for longer than 2 weeks that don't have behavioral issues. And that is, up to the owner. It's, I always ask the owner is like, hey, do you want to spend your money for your time, or do you want your time for money, right? So do you have a lot of time to dedicate to training your dog to get them to the degree of obedience that you want, right? If you have a lot of time, awesome. Maybe a 2 week is fine, and I will teach you everything that you need to know. But if you don't have a lot of time and you do have money, then being with a professional for a longer period of time is going to be much more beneficial for you, if that makes sense.
So I often have, subscribers who are terribly frustrated with their dog's behaviors, and sometimes they feel as if their dog is untrainable. So my question to you is, I want to know if you've ever dealt with a dog whose owners have had the same sentiment, and what you did to help the relationship between their dog and the owner.
Yes, I have definitely had, off the top of my head, there are several dogs that come to mind where owners were just at, pun intended, at the end of their leash. They were absolutely they're like, you know what, this is our last shot. You are the fourth trainer that we've been to. This dog is tearing our life apart. And I have had owners just like at the end of the board and train literally break down in tears and have been like, you do not know what this training has done. You have saved our marriage. And it's that was like
That's
my first
crazy.
year of being in business too. And I haven't cried in front of a client before, but like I cried with her because she had like so much relief in her voice, and like she was just breaking down. And because she had like a little beagle puppy, and her husband had only been married for a handful of years, and they just recently had a baby. And this beagle puppy was like this beagle pushed me to my limits, and it definitely just like it helped me evolve as a trainer for sure. And so like and I think that like a part of the relief that I was feeling as well, I was just like, thank God that like that like I was able to help this dog, because this dog was such a nightmare.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine like a beagle. They're not even like that big.
It was just this tiny little thing too. But like this dog was just like something else. And it's always funny for me. I think that every dog trainer has that like one dog breed that just like really pushes them. I think for a lot of trainers it's German Shepherds, but I actually really like German Shepherds, and I don't mind their whininess or anything like that. But for me it's beagles. Every single beagle that I get, I'm just like, why do I take on beagles for training? But anyway, when it comes to those clients that have really challenging dogs and they're like, I don't know, like I am so hesitant about this training. It really comes down to education. And I think that I really say that a lot to, when I answer questions on my live streams or stories, or and people are like, hey, like, how do I get someone to understand XYZ or blah, blah, blah. And I always go back to, education is always the best thing, because in those moments that people are really frustrated, it's because we're not seeing eye to eye with our dogs. And for me, when I was really frustrated with that beagle that I was training, it was because I just didn't understand the dog. And so once I took some time to like actually understand the dog, and then I was able to educate the owner on like, hey, here's the nuances of your dog. Like it's its own individual, and the training is personalized to this dog. And once you're able to help the owner understand, a lot of the frustration just comes from not understanding. And when people don't understand things, they start to take their dog's behavior as a personal attack to them. And it's not personal at all. The dog is just doing dog things, and they just want to better their own situation. And so once you're like, hey, when your dog does XYZ, your dog's not intentionally trying to piss you off. Like your dog is actually just wanting to do this, and this. So when this happens, do A, B, and C. So it always comes down to education for me, and just being able to educate people when they're just like, I don't know about this training. I'm just like really frustrated. Like I'm worried that this dog just like is gonna have to be in a different home. I'm like, no, let's just take it one step at a time. Like just get through training first.
Yeah, and for that beagle, how long did you have him for?
I had that dog for 3 weeks.
Oh wow, that's crazy. That is insane. And then how like the owners totally saved their marriage. That is crazy. But
Yeah.
it's really crazy because like dogs really form such a big part of people's lives. You know, they're
Yeah.
with you all the time. So I mean, I don't doubt it. That's crazy. Next question. So you said that you've had a lot of experience. You've reached, so for your own company you've done 100 dogs, but you trained more dogs prior to that. So you've trained a bunch of dogs from
Oh,
start to
yes.
finish.
And those are just hands-on dogs, like not included so many virtual dogs that I've trained.
So what would you say is the number one problemed behavior that you've dealt with the most common issue that you've dealt with without throughout all those dogs?
Leash pulling. I would say leash pulling is number one that people are really frustrated with. And then jumping on people would probably be number two. And then barking would be number three. And like reactivity stuff, like is obviously gonna like be in there. And a lot of the times that comes with leash pulling. But I think that a lot of people, when they envision having a dog, they imagine themselves like going on a walk down the sidewalk on a really nice bright sunny day with their family, and they're just laughing and they're having fun and they have their dog with
Running in
them.
slow motion.
And yeah, and it's like all these things, and then what they get is like this dog that's like like dislocating their shoulder or like dragging them to the ground and doing all these different things, and they're like, this is not what I wanted. Like I wanted to just like skip down the sidewalk with my dog and like enjoy the sunshine with my family, and this picture perfect Hollywood sort of movie scene, and that's not what they get. And so they're just like incredibly frustrated. And a lot of people don't realize that leash walking is actually a pretty advanced behavior to teach a dog. And it's a pretty coveted thing that people want their dog to do. And so I would say that that's probably across the board the number one thing that I see the most of. And then jumping and barking quickly following that.
Wow, and you were quick for that one too. Like it took you like less than a second. You're like, leash pulling. Yeah, and you're right. It does take a long time because there's so much that goes behind like teaching a dog how to heel. Because it's not only like, okay, like let's heel like when everything is fine, but it's also like, what if there's like a lot of distractions? What if there's like a crazy dog walking towards us? Like, there's so many things that go into it. So yeah, I can definitely see how that's the biggest problem that people have. Okay, so I have personally, as I mentioned to you before, I've had this ongoing journey training my own Cane Corso Dante, in regards to his reactivity. And there was a time in which I felt embarrassed and even judged, or like afraid that I would be judged for his behavior, when it got to the point that it was like, okay, like we have to do something about this. So my question to you is that for people having issues with their dog's behavior in terms of aggression or reactivity, what is a piece of advice that you would give to them in making that first step?
Yeah, I think that the first step in helping people overcome those more severe behavioral issues is, for one, just actually accepting that there is a problem. And I know that that sounds weird, but I think that there are a lot of people that are dealing with a dog with behavioral issues, and they get such a sweet dog at home. Like, as someone that used to have like a very, very severe leash reactive dog, and Aurora, she is very dog selective and she could definitely have aggressive tendencies. It was one of those things where you don't see that side of your dog all of the time, and so you're kind of like hesitant to even like accept that it's even a problem to begin with. And I think that there's a lot of people that they have a reactive dog or an aggressive dog or whatever it may be, and they haven't actually truly accepted the fact that their dog has these different problems, because they go home and they're sitting on the couch and their dog is curled up next to them and they're so sweet, and their dog like puts their head like on your lap and they look at you with those eyes, and how your heart just kind of like swells but also like clenches at the same time, and you're like, I love you so much. I would die for you. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? You
yeah.
just look at your dog and you're like, I love you so much. How do I love you this much? I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I
I understand you completely.
but and so when you're dealing with a dog like that, it's just kind of like you need to admit to yourself that like there's actually a problem there, and that your dog is not living the best life possible. Like that's super stressful for your dog. Like if you feel like it's super stressful for, you know, you as you're dealing with the reactivity, imagine how your dog is feeling when they are in those situations, because they're having those reactions for a reason. So I know that's probably not like the you know, like put structure and boundaries in your house, you know, whatever. But I think that really is the first thing that when I'm having a conversation with people and they're explaining all these different things, and I'm like, oh, so your dog's reactive. And they're like, well, I wouldn't say that my dog's reactive. And I would say, okay, you know, tell me more about that. Why don't you think that your dog is reactive? And they're like, oh, well, you know, like they would never, you know, like bite someone. I'm like, your dog doesn't have to bite someone to be, you know, reactive. And so I think that it's just like accepting certain things about your dog's behavior is sometimes the first step in training. But like a more applicable approach that people can take is that a lot of reactive dogs, they don't have the home structure that they need for them in specific. So I know that it's like a really popular thing with trainers of like, get your dog off the couch and off the bed. That's not necessarily the type of structure that I am talking about. I'm talking about like more predictability in your day. Does your dog have a set of rules that they understand that they can live inside of? Where do their boundaries to their rules start and stop? And I think that that's the part where a lot of reactive dogs, they just don't have a lot of self inhibition, because that's really all that like reactivity and aggression is. It's that it's just really crappy impulse control. And when your dog understands inhibition, and inhibition can be learned through rules, and structure and boundaries is just another way to provide rules to your dog. It's not that the couch will magically make your dog reactive, or the bed will make your dog reactive or aggressive. It's that, do you have rules for your dog, and does your dog understand what those rules are? And if they're not clearly defined, like if them as the owner, if you ask them, what are the rules in your house? And they can't be like, okay, the dog can't do this, 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 and this, and the dog can do this, 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 and this. And when the dog does the thing that they are not allowed to do, they will have X, Y, and Z consequences. How can the dog really have any inhibition and like know what's right from wrong? And so I think that just having some really good clarity within your own home, like don't try and meet things head on when you're outside where you see these different problems of aggression or reactivity. Get your own home in order inside first. And having just really clearly defined rules is the first way. And that helps relieve a lot of anxiety and stress, which is what causes a lot of reactive behaviors in dogs.
Okay, so now since we're talking about, behavioral issues, I'm actually very curious to know if you are very hands-on with aggressive dogs in particular. And if you are, what are some precautions that you need to ensure and that you need to take to make sure that the training experience itself is positive without putting yourself or the owners in danger?
That's a really hard one, because it's when it comes to aggression, there are so many varying levels of it, and each dog, how that behavior manifests in the dog is going to be very different. Like there's the silent but deadly ones, and then there's the ones who's like really loud about it and very obvious about it. And so it's very different. And as a trainer for me, I'm probably more overly cautious than other trainers. And I don't know if it's maybe just that I don't have enough reps with aggressive dogs or what, but like I really, really, really take my time with that. Like relationship building and being neutral around an aggressive dog is of the utmost importance to me. And so, what that looks like for me, for just being really safe, is that I make sure that I have a lot of control over the environment. So if I'm working with a dog that has aggressive tendencies, if I feel like there is any potential for them to inflict any sort of harm on children, on people, or other dogs, or anything like that, like I am not taking that dog out to have them go for a walk at like 7 a.m. in the morning. My whole entire neighborhood's outside. Like the risk in that poses to other people is extremely high, but also to myself as well, because redirection is a really big thing that you have to watch out for. So just like being really smart with it, and just a lot of for precautions for me. I don't know. That's really hard to say. I've never really been asked that question before. So I guess I don't really know exactly the different things that I really do, because it's so individual to the dog. But when it comes to the humans and telling and turning over a dog that has those different behavioral issues, I have a really detailed plan for them when they go home. Like I have worksheets for them. Like I have graphs for them, and I'm like, hey, like here's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Here are the different commands. Here are the check boxes that you need to do that is personalized to this dog in specific. These are the things that I need you to work on. These are the things that you absolutely should not be doing with this dog until you see X, Y, Z and types of behavior. And being really clear with the owners is how I ensure that the owners are also really safe with those different types of dogs too. And just having like really open conversations with them. And I think that can be really hard as a dog trainer, and where it comes with a lot of personal development as well, is just like learning how to have really difficult conversations with clients that they may not want to hear. Because some people, they're like, oh, training can definitely fix this problem. And I'm like, no, it can't. Like your dog is not going to be the dog that is going to enjoy, being in downtown Raleigh at a brewery. Like, to be honest with you, you should probably never take your dog out to a brewery. You can't, you shouldn't. And that's some really hard conversations that you have to have. Or like if there's kids in the home and they have a history of biting, like as a trainer, I feel like there is a moral obligation and responsibility to have a conversation and sit the owners down and be like, hey, look, you may have to think about potentially like this, your home isn't the best fit for this dog. And that sucks, but like, I don't want to see your children get bit again. And I don't want this dog to be put down, because your dog's a really good dog. Your dog's a solid dog, but your dog needs to be, in an environment that's not in downtown Raleigh with 5 little kids running around. That's just like not the best environment for it. So kind of went off on a tangent there, but hopefully.
No, it was still in the realm of aggressive
In the realm
dogs.
of it.
Yeah. So yeah, no. And have you ever had to, for example, like muzzle a dog while you're training them in, like, okay, so for example, if you have an aggressive dog, you would have to probably determine whether you would be able to have that dog boarding with you, or whether it's something other than boarding is better. Like if it's just maybe the owner has to be the one that's doing most of it, right? Like,
yeah, definitely. And I think that for really, really aggressive dogs that they do not trust anyone besides the owner, being more hands-off in that way and working with the owner one-on-one and telling them and teaching them what to do before they put hands on their own dog and like work with the leash in them and stuff, that's usually the best thing for really aggressive dogs. But I myself, sometimes you never know how a dog is going to react in the levels of aggressiveness or reactivity that they have until you start working with them. And as a trainer, I think that one of the most powerful things that my first mentor taught me was how to really know my way around a leash, because there have been plenty of times where a dog has come up the line at me, and I've definitely had to, string a dog for a second, because it's just like they're very committed to the behavior, and they're just like, yeah, I'm not going to do this. And if you put any pressure on me, I'm going to come up the line at you and be like, you're not going to attack that thing, so I'm not going to let you do that. And so the dog will then redirect onto you, and you're just like, I can't let that happen either. And so just like knowing my way around a leash as well, it kind of is a scary thing, but it's one of those things where I think that that's something that all dog trainers and even dog owners as well, if you have a dog that has some really severe reactivity, to know your way around a leash. That way, if the dog does come up the line at you, you do know what to do. And especially if you do you know, have a dog actually like land some teeth on you as well.
Have you ever gotten bitten by a dog?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Do you remember your first one?
Yes, actually. So my first one was when I was working at the dog training facility, and it
Getting
was
so nervous. Just thinking about
it was honestly my fault completely though. Like it was not the dog's fault. It was like a really nervy, it was a tiny dog. I think it was like uh what was it? A cocker spaniel poodle mix or something like that. But it
Wow.
was like this tiny little dog. And we were doing like play sessions or something like that. And this dog was like hiding out in the corner, and the other dogs were like going to bully it. So like I went and like to provide some spatial pressure and get the other dogs away. And then it was time for all the dogs to go back into their kennels. And so the other dog like wouldn't come. So, you know, she was just kind of like walking around, and I went to like go and pick her up. And this was like when I kind of like first started. First of all, I should have just grabbed a slip lead instead of like going to pick up the dog.
Yeah, because you probably thought like, oh, it's little, like I might as well just,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yep. 100% my fault. And this little dog, she spins around so fast and she commits to the behavior. She turns around and she like nails me on the hand, and she actually committed like pretty good to the behavior. And for a second I was like taken aback, and the next second later I was like, you know what? I'm not even mad. I'm kind of impressed. Like that was like good for you. Like that was bad on me. I should have
like don't pick me up.
Yeah, so that one was kind of funny, but I mean, honestly, I think that for a dog trainer, I have actually been pretty lucky with how little I have been bit, because I am like way overly conscious of that. Like even the most friendly of dogs, like I am always looking at their body language. I'm just like, yeah, no dog is ever getting too close to my face, because just like I don't want whatever to happen, you know, for the dog to feel some type of way. The closest bite that I've ever gotten was a dog landed a pretty good bite on my forearm, and it was actually a Malinois personal protection dog that didn't have very good obedience on it. And I was sitting there with the owner, and we're just shooting the shit, and we had just done some bite work and everything. And I was just like sitting there, like kind of crisscross applesauce. And then the dog was like sitting like in front of his owner. And then I like look over at the owner, and the dog comes in, and it was a personal protection dog. So like he's used to biting on a sleeve and like committing to the behavior. And that was one of the most scariest bites that I've ever had, because as I was sitting there, I know that like if I were to react to it and pull away, for one, his canines would go into my arm even more. But he was a thrasher. So he would have locked on, and then he would have thrashed my arm. And so I literally had to like sit there and pretend like nothing was happening as this dog was like locked on my arm. So I have this like nice little like triangle scar where his like canines like pierced into me. But I think that was like probably like the worst.
I can't even imagine. You know, you were literally, you know that meme of that dog that's sitting like on a kitchen table and everything's on fire?
Yes.
That was literally you, because you couldn't move.
Literally just like had to sit there as like this dog is just like on my arm, and I'm like, Natalie, if you move, he's gonna start thrashing, and you're about to have a literal chunk ripped out of your tricep. So I was like, okay, don't move.
Oh my goodness, that is insane. That's crazy. And it wasn't just like any dog either. You said it was a personal protection dog. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. Ugh, okay, wow, that's crazy. I loved your latest post on your business account that talked about genetics, and I'll probably like have it up for people to read it on their own so they have some context on it. But it really spoke to me, and as the owner of a Cane Corso, I see how it is really important to be aware of certain traits that your dog has and what they were bred to do when you go into training. So like, for example, Dante, he was bred to be a guardian of his property. He was a Roman war dog at one point. And when I was dealing with his reactivity issues, I was like, I want him to be so friendly with everybody. Like I want him to be like so good with like everybody, like, you know, like all of my friends that come in and everything. And then I started to realize, I'm like, wait, no, like I can't be having these expectations for him. Like taking into account everything that, you know, his breed was bred to do. He's a guardian dog, so he's not going to be liking strangers that come in. So yeah, that wasn't his job. And for me, it changed my expectations, because I was like, you know what, now I know that it's a huge accomplishment if he's neutral to people. He sees them, he ignores them, sniffs, go away, doesn't care. If he disengages, if he looks at something and I'm able to redirect him back to me, that is what is an accomplishment for that guy. So I was like, so when I saw your post, I was like, yes, this is, hi. Yes. Oh my god, you're so cute. He knows I'm talking about him. So I know. So yeah, so I love that post. I thought it was amazing. And in your experience, what are some expectations and training that you already have for some particular dog breeds?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I love this question, actually. So I get a lot of German Shepherds, and probably the reason for that is because I have a German Shepherd Husky, and he looks more German Shepherd than he does Husky. And so any sort of like herding breed, I already have the expectation they're going to be nervous, they're going to be whiny, they're going to have a little bit of separation anxiety, and they're typically going to be reactive. If I'm dealing with a Golden Retriever or with a Lab, they're going to be really overexcited. They're not going to have a lot of really good duration in commands, and that's going to be something that we're going to have to work on. Obviously, if I get Malinois and Dutch Shepherds or working line German Shepherds, I'm going to be dealing with a lot of forward movement and commitment and behaviors. I wouldn't necessarily say aggression, but definitely that. So there, you know, depending on the breed, I have had enough reps with so many different types of dogs that I'm already like, oh, I'm doing this consultation. I'm like, okay, like, you know, what sort of breed is your dog and how old are they? And they're like, German Shepherd. I'm like, okay, I'm going to have, you know, anxiety, whining, like all these different things. And then once they give me their age of the dog, I'm like, okay, now I know the type of intensity that I'm probably dealing with from there. And from then, you know, being able to easily and quickly recognize that as a dog trainer, I think that that's where, when I'm doing consultations with people, I'm really able to bring them on as a client very easily, because then as I'm able to like fill in parts of their story, because I already know what their life has been like. They're like, oh yeah, like, you know, I have a German Shepherd and they're 4 years old. I'm like, yeah, how's all that whining? And they're like, yeah, like they whine so much. I'm like, yeah, I bet. Like, you know, how they do with separation anxiety? And then they go off on all these things. I'm able to fill in a lot of their story for them, which is like really beneficial. So being a dog trainer is always really fun, because before you even get a dog in, you're kind of already prepped for the different things.
You're like, oh, I already know this. Okay, I get this one.
Oh yeah.
And just out of curiosity, for German Shepherds in particular, why do you think that they have an issue with anxiety? Because I trained 2 German Shepherds, and the first one that I trained, she like got very attached to me, and she was creative. Like she would spend like if we're not training, like she was in her crate. But like I remember one time handing her over to another trainer because I had to like go somewhere real quick, and she was like screaming bloody murder, and I was like, girl, like I haven't even seen you do this like before. Like you're making me look bad in front of all these people. Like what's going on? So like, why do you think, like why is that a problem for them?
You know, honestly, that's one of the reasons why people love German Shepherds so much, is because German Shepherds are like one of the breeds that they build social bonds very easily. They have high levels of affiliation. And so when they decide that they like someone, they have like an obsessive personality. They're like, hey, I know we just met, but like, I love you. Like I love you. And that's what makes them like really such great companion dogs, is because like when your German Shepherd dog loves you, they're like, you have them for life. Like they're not going anywhere. You don't have to worry about anything at all. And so that pertains a lot to anxiety, but also they're just like wicked smart dogs. And so their brains are constantly going all of the time. And if you don't give them something to do, then it's going to like manifest in a lot of like whining and separation anxiety and all those different things. So, I mean, I couldn't 100% give you the reason, because as much as I would love to sit down my dog and be like, hey, buddy, like, what's up?
Why are you like this?
Like, and for him to go, oh, you know what, mom, like, I just have this problem where I just love you so much. So we'll never actually know, but that's my hunch.
Oh man, that's really interesting. How like within the breed, so genetics do play a big role.
Oh, they
It's crazy.
do. Yeah, they do.
Yeah. So I saw another really funny reel on your I think on my personal Instagram account. I can't remember. I follow both. So I saw it, and it was about how the dog training community always seems to be fighting about what the correct way of training your dog is, and you did one version of yourself, or any, I guess, representing any kind of dog trainer that was holding treats, and I guess that would be the positive reinforcement only, and then you had another side of a dog trainer just, you know, using the prong collar or the e-collar, and there just always seems to be this kind of disagreement. So my question to you is, in your time as a dog trainer, how have you developed your own unique style in an industry that still has so much disagreement within itself?
Yeah. You know what? I love dogs so much, but let me tell you, I do not love the dog training community. There is so much internal carnage. It is insane. And I was not prepared for it. Well, let me take that back. It's not that I don't like it. It's just that sometimes it's a little stressful being in the dog community, and you yourself as someone who is, you know, an influencer in the community with, you know, you have a dog page on YouTube. You know, you probably are also subject to a lot of the different things that people say in regards to how you should train your dog. If there's one thing that the internet loves and the dog community loves to do, it's to tell other people how they should train their dog or not train their dog. You know what I mean? And so, you know, for me, developing my own style, it took a lot of security in my own education. And when I first started out, if I could go back in time and give previous Natalie all those years ago a piece of wisdom, it would be
Baby Natalie.
Yeah, baby Natalie. Like, if I could give baby Natalie like a little bit of wisdom, it would definitely be to just be more confident in the things that I know to be true. I think that I was just like, everyone had so many opinions and they were so strong in their opinions. I thought that I was doing something wrong, even though I knew my own education and I knew what made sense to me. And I was like, oh gosh, like, wait, like, is that actually right? Like, I don't know. And so like for me, like developing my own training, even when there is all of this, like people being like, oh no, you should only train a dog this way, or you should never use an e-collar for reactivity, or, you know, you should never put a prong collar on a 4-month-old dog, or any of, you know, there's so many different things that like you apparently cannot do or can do in dog training. It was just like knowing just knowing with 100% clarity, what is my education and what do I know to be true? And, you know, developing that, it really came down from learning from everywhere. I would say that I have consumed, as much as like I like to poke fun at them sometimes, but like I've learned a tremendous amount from purely positive force-free trainers. Like I've learned so much. I used to be really bad with food handling. I used to be really bad with my timing. I wasn't able to motivate a dog very well because I didn't know how to use food in a way that would be exciting for a dog. And so I've learned a lot from them. I've learned a lot from compulsion trainers as well, of how not to train a dog, of just like, yeah, I see what it is that you're doing and I'm going to learn from you because I never want to do the thing that you are doing. And that teaches a person a lot. And so in an industry that has like so much carnage and people are constantly at each other's throats, I just kind of sit back and I just observe. I try to take out all of the nonsense and be like, okay, what are actually the valuable things that is actually pertaining to the dog that's actually actually working. And then I'm going to take what I like, and then I just kind of like leave what I don't. I'm just kind of like, okay, this is all really great, but what's the actual nugget of information? And then I take all of that, and all of the rest of the opinions and the whatever it is that they want to call themselves, I just leave all of that on the table. I'm just like, okay, great. Like, I don't want to be a part of that. I want to train dogs. So take what I like and I leave what I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's really important what you said, because I feel like because of, you know, Dante in particular, the first trainer that we went to, he was just positive reinforcement. He had a martingale on, and the first time that we went in to take him to his lesson, was like, you got to take that off. You got to take that off right now. We don't use that here. Like, Cesar Millan like messed it up forever, but like he was like very, very, very like certain that that was the wrong thing to do. Same thing with prong collars, and we were like training him with the prong collar. So but yeah, so I think it's very important what you said, that you have to kind of look and learn from as many places as you can, even the wrong things. Because even though like sometimes I'm like, oh man, like maybe I wish that I had taken him out of that training like session, because that's where he had all his bad experiences, right? Like, I wish I had taken him out. I wish I had noticed that. And that is true, but at the same time I'm like, but I learned a lot from that though. You know, like maybe I wouldn't have wanted that experience for my dog, but I did learn like, okay, like this is not the way to go. So I think that there is a importance in even learning the things that are just not good as well.
Sure. There definitely is.
Yeah. Okay, so I did see, I don't know if this is like unique to you, but I noticed that sometimes when you're kind of like redirecting a dog, and this is like in a couple of videos that I've seen you do it, instead of doing like a leash pop, like if a dog is like barking or jumping or whatever, you kind of like quiver the leash, like you go like this. And I've never seen that before. So was that something that you learned? Is that something that you came up with? Like, I want to know, like, what's up with that? Like,
actually, that I've never had someone bring that up to me before, ever. And what's actually really funny about that, so I think that as people that are dog trainers, I would say, well, let me ask you this. You know, having, trained your own dogs and other dogs as well, do you feel like you have an intuitiveness to training dogs? Do you just kind of feel like you sort of, without even explaining it, you just kind of know what to do?
well, kind of, yeah, because it's not always the same for every dog.
You kind of like feel it, and you kind of like know what to do. So that was something that I had always done with dogs, and I had literally no idea why. I was just like, I feel like this is just something that just like works for me, and this is the way that like I handle a leash and the way that I move around it. It wasn't something that I was distinctly taught. But a year ago, or oh my gosh, maybe it was 2 years at this point, I went down to Florida, and I went to a dog training seminar, and it was about knee popo style of training. And so knee popo,
Knee popo?
yeah, knee popo.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's a system of training, and it's actually trademarked from Bart Bellin, and he is like one of the like masters of the dog world. But anyway, so NEPOPO stands for negative, positive, positive. And a lot of my training is based off of NEPOPO, which means that negative reinforcement, the removal of negative reinforcement is positively reinforcing. It's a shitty reinforcer, but it is reinforcing. And then you follow with an additional reinforcer. So negative reinforcement, nay, po, the removal of the negative reinforcement, and then additional positive reinforcer, nay, po, po. So it's two positives for the one negative. Anyway, so I went to this dog training seminar, and he was talking about the origins of the Hermspringer prong collar and how it got a really bad rap because during the yank and crank era of that originated from gun dogs, of how they would use pressure to a very high degree, right? And so he was talking about how, the Hermspringer prong collar, it wasn't meant to be a tool of positive punishment. You weren't supposed to just like correct, like once. It was supposed to be a tool of negative reinforcement where it's supposed to open, close, open, close, open, close. And dogs are all about pressure on, pressure off. And that's how we condition dogs to these different tools, right? And so the thing that I had always been doing with the leash, where I actually give like quick taps like through the leash instead of like a lot bigger taps through the leash, I use a lot of negative reinforcement. He that was like even solidified. It was like one of those like light bulb moments of just like, holy shit, wait, like I do that thing. That's the thing that I do. And now I have a reason behind like why it is that I do that thing. And so it's really effective for that, because instead of it being highly aversive to the dog, it's an annoyance instead. And when that annoyance turns off, it's reinforcing, and it wasn't so punishing to the dog that when you try to give them that positive reinforcer, it doesn't negate the amount of correction that you gave if you gave them one larger correction instead of a lot of little tiny ones that was just kind of like annoying, kind of like a fly buzzing around, right? It would be like if a bee came and like stung your face, and then like someone gave you like a little M&M, you'd be like, thanks, but that doesn't take away the pain. Or there's like a fly buzzing around your face, and then someone gives you like a really big cookie, right? You're just like, oh, like the fly goes away and it removes that annoyance, and then you get a big cookie. Or a bee stings your face and like you get like an M&M, right? You see what I mean? Like the reward to the consequence isn't as much. And so yeah, that's really interesting that you point that out. Yeah, it is a very observant of you. I've never had someone mention that before.
Yeah, because I saw it and I was like, what is that? Like, I was like,
Yeah.
what? And then you talked about it and you were like, look, this is an annoyance instead. And I was like, yeah, I do see that. But then I was like, how come I've never seen anybody else do this? I usually see like the leash pop. I usually see like you correct the dog right away, but wow, it has a whole reason. So that's really cool. Super cool.
When you get teachings from everywhere that you possibly can, because I get teachings from like the pure positive, so I do like a lot of bat counter conditioning desensitization. I do a lot of me-po-po. I do some Keeler method of training. Like when you have all this education from everywhere, you have a very big toolbox of things that you can draw from. And so like the amount of dogs that you're able to turn around and the degree to which that you can turn them around and train them becomes a lot better and higher quality, because you don't have like a limited amount of tools that you can like use from in your toolbox. Your toolbox is so big from everywhere. So yeah, anyway, tangent.
Cool. No, I think that's awesome. Okay, so we were talking about the dog industry a little bit before, and just the dog training community in general. So when I personally started to share content online, when I created the YouTube channel for Dante, and then Peach came out later, but when I first started, I would get a lot of comments from people regarding my size and the types of dogs that I had. You're 5'1", I'm 5'2". You beat me by a little bit, but people would make comments on that and talk about how I shouldn't have a dog like Dante or Peach, an Italian Mastiff, because I myself was not strong enough to be able to restrain them. So I would get comments like that, or I would also get comments like, oh, actually that's not even her dog, it's probably her husband's dog, or like they probably listen to her husband more. So being in the dog training community as a female, have you dealt with this kind of discrimination, and how have you, whether it's been with clients or other dog trainers, and how have you like addressed this and overcome it?
That's a really hard one. Because I think that the dog training industry was primarily male dominated for a very long time. Like and I think that the big female names in the game were primarily pure positive force free trainers like Karen Pryor or like Victoria Stillwell and all those other trainers. And so I think it was like very male dominated. And when I first came into the industry, and even now to this day, I get a lot of hate online. Like the amount of nasty things that people say to me, like I don't delete them all the time. Like on any post that you go and look at, someone's saying something nasty, to me. And, sometimes the way that I handle it is that most of the time if I can tell that it's going to be a nasty comment, I just delete it. Like I don't even give any.
I'm just reading it.
Yeah, I sometimes I just can't, because when you have like over 58,000 people following you online, there's just like some nasty things. And like I don't even go to the comments on YouTube. Absolutely not. Like I don't know how you are on YouTube, but like I don't even go to the comment section on YouTube, because it's just a lot of really negative people on there, and they're really mean. But you know, the way that I've kind of handled it as well is that I have gotten to a point in my own personal growth and development of just recognizing that a lot of people that are so nasty have something that is really bad in their life. Like, people don't just go around and be cruel for absolutely no good reason. Like, sure, there are like some psychopaths out there, but for the majority of people, they're deeply unhappy. And so, a lot of the times I just kind of wish them well, and I let them know, hey, like I'll pray for you. Like, I'm sorry, like you're feeling this way. Like, I hope you find some happiness. And it's really hard to sometimes let that go, because every once in a while, sometimes people will say things that like really deeply hurt you. Like, whenever I'm training a dog and they're like, wow, that dog looks like miserable. Like, I would never leave my dog with you. And that kind of, oh, that kind of hurts a little bit,
You don't
like,
even know me.
oh, like you don't even know me. And especially for those dogs that like are really, they've just like really tested you. And and it's always seems to happen where it's at, you post something and you're like, wow, like finally, like the training's finally clicking, like the dog's finally doing the thing, like they're finally relaxing, and then someone with their greasy fingers are like, wow, that dog looks so shut down, like you're a shitty dog trainer, I would never leave my dog with you. And you're like, oh man, like, that kind of sucks. So it can sometimes be hard to recognize that those people have something like deeply unhappy within themselves. But the other thing is that I've noticed that the more that you grow a really positive community and you don't retaliate, like I don't retaliate back to those people. People that say nasty things, I never say nasty things back to them. A lot of times people are just searching for dopamine, and they're quite literally, like literally addicted to arguing online. And so I don't say anything back. And what I've noticed is that because I don't do that, actually more often than not, people come to my guard, and actually people will come to me in the comments and they'll actually defend me. And I actually don't have to deal with those people at all. But it all starts with like not arguing back to those people is where it all begins. And just realizing, you know what? They just had a really bad day, and apparently they just needed to take their frustration out. And like someone that they just don't have a relationship with on the internet, I was their target. So I guess that like that's the role that I play for them today. But I'm not going to respond back to them and give them that little rush of dopamine that they're going to get knowing that they pissed me off.
Yeah, and I think that really when you put yourself out there, like online, it's really easy for people to be keyboard warriors because they don't actually see you. Like, it's so easy to say something rude, when you're not actually there. It's easier for people to be brave.
Yes.
So yeah, but that's great advice. Pretty much just ignore it. And then when you do create a positive community, people come in and yeah, they defended you. So awesome. Okay, last couple of questions, and then last two questions, and then we're going into the speed round. So I did notice that for some time on your business page, you didn't, or it wasn't very active for some time. And of course, if you don't want to talk about it, that's totally fine. But I realized that later on you said that you have lost access to it. So do you mind talking about that? Or
Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty much almost wrapped up now, but I went through I'd been in a very long relationship with someone, and this someone was a partner in the business. And the relationship unfortunately did not go how it needed to, and I was punished, and that was in the form of losing access to my business assets and to my community. My community on Instagram is something that is is very close to me. And I think that's one of the reasons why, as a new trainer in the scene, I was able to grow an audience quite quickly. And I was able to find the success online on my social platforms as I did, is because like I deeply care for the people that follow me. Like people don't always see it, but like I try and do lives all the time to answer as many questions as I can for like free advice. Like I'm constantly answering questions in my DMs for free. Like there's a lot of people that like go unread because I'm only one person and I can only do so much, and that's really an emotional drain. But my community on Instagram is very, very dear and near to my heart. And so the way that he was able to hurt me the most was to lock me out of my business and the thing that I'm most passionate about. And so I didn't have, it's not that I didn't want to take a break. It has been good to take a break, but it's just that I just didn't have any access to it. And so, at this point in time, I think that I am actually not quite exactly sure what is going to be happening with canine performance at this point in time. So we'll see kind of what happens. But it's almost cleared up actually. And it's been, since the beginning of this year that it's been going on. So it's almost been like a full year of, what's today, August 14th. Yeah, it's been like 6-7 months of a legal battle, but it's almost wrapped up. So that's one of the reasons why I wasn't very active. It wasn't really for any other reason besides I didn't have access to any of my stuff to be able to. So, but I'm back now for the time being. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I was happy to see a post on there again. But yeah, I mean, I hope that everything gets sorted. It's really unfortunate. I feel really bad about it. So I hope that everything does. I honestly, sincerely, I do hope that
I think it will. I'm really excited for whatever comes next.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so what are your goals moving forward? Where do you see yourself? I know this is a very typical question, cliche maybe, but what are your goals?
Well, actually, the really good thing that being locked out of my business was actually able to afford me was that like I took a really deep look at just like, what do I really want for myself? I am, I turned 28 this year, and I kind of feel like I'm sort of starting over in a lot of ways. And so I was like, what do I really want moving forward? And I like, don't get me wrong, I love training dogs. Like I love hanging out with dogs and teaching them and working with them like one-on-one. Like that's my shit. Like I love to do that. That's really great. But I think that where my zone of genius really lies is with teaching other people. I love to educate people. Like I think I would have made a really, really great teacher. And feel like I have like so much education and knowledge that sometimes I almost feel like it just like spills out of me in the most annoying ways possible. And so for me moving forward, I really want to develop out a really good shadow program. Like I think that there are a lot of people that are looking for really good quality trainers that are also really good at teaching. And I think if there's one thing that I'm pretty good at, if I could toot my own horn, is that I think I'm pretty good at teaching people and I have a lot to offer. And so I want to build out a really good shadow program for people that maybe they already have their own business, right? And they're just looking for another way of training. Awesome, great. Like come shadow, just kind of like see how I work dogs. Maybe you have an interest in dog training and you already know how to train dogs, but you don't know how to start a business. Hey, you know what? I have always been in business. That's where my foundation lies. I went to college to learn about business, marketing and advertising and management. And so I want to kind of start that up and be able to help other people in the industry. And I think that throughout the people that I can bring throughout my shadow program, I can also cultivate a more positive experience in the dog training industry. Like I want to be able to coach people how to move with just really good ethics and morals and grace, and not, just be like, hey, like we don't have to be nasty online to one another. Like we can be better people. And I think that I have an opportunity to mentor people. So that's one thing. And I think that also being able to bring other trainers underneath me as well. I think that a lot of dog trainers kind of want to do that. They want to be able to have other trainers under them. So not just like train other trainers, but also have people like under my own business. If that continues to be Canine Performance, or if I do unfortunately have to make a new business, then I want to be able to bring some trainers underneath me. And then I've written several dog training books. So I have been writing a lot of books as well. And so just bringing that out, and then also online programs, because when you write a book, you can also like put it into a program as well. And I think that there are a lot of individuals. When I got into the dog training industry, I saw that there was a really big, like, dog training is expensive, right? Like it's super expensive if you want to get your dog trained. It takes a lot of time, and a lot of access to trainers that you know, like, and trust isn't always there. And so I want to be able to provide people that don't have $3,000 to send their dog to a board and train, or, they don't have anyone even around them, even if they do have the money to be able to send their dog to a board and train, that I can have programs that are really educational, that they make sense, that they are rooted in science. And people can train their dog from home ethically and morally as well. So that's kind of like what I see for myself in the next little while. But in the meantime, it's just kind of like figuring out what's going on in my present company.
Oh, well, that's really exciting to hear. And just before we go into the speed round, where can you find your books for anybody who's interested in listening? Not like I'm interested or anything, but
they are not published yet because I do not want them included in my current business's assets. So that way, should it be divided, they are not included and they will stay with me as my own intellectual property. So they are not there yet, but they will be available on Amazon and Google Play and my new website that will be coming up.
That is so exciting. Okay, so, now we're finally into the speed round. Okay, so these questions, I'll ask them to you and you're just gonna try to answer them as quickly and as concisely as you can in a sentence. So,
perfect.
Okay, so for owners new to training, what are some items you'd recommend to be a part of their dog training starter pack?
Yes, dog trainer starter pack. You need a food pouch for one. I'd recommend also getting an elevated dog bed, a high quality biothane leash. Go to the dollar store and get just a cheap dollar store leash, cut the handle off, and that's called a drag line. So get one of those. And I would say that those are like the basic sort of things. You can do a lot of things with just those things. If you want to add even more to that, get a 2.25 Hermspringer prong collar, because that will fit the majority of dogs. And then also get a clicker as well. And I would say that that would really increase a lot of your dog training things. So I would say that that would be like the big starter pack.
Awesome. All right, next question. So COVID and quarantine have left many people looking for companionship, and this has translated into a lot of people adopting or buying puppies, new dogs, and sadly we've been seeing that they've been overwhelmed with this new responsibility, and a lot of these dogs are being put back into shelters. So what would you say to people who are thinking about giving their dogs back?
I would say first, find online training programs and try to do training before you decide to bring your dog back to a shelter, if you do not have the money to send your dog to a board and train. But if you do have the money, please do training first before you put your dog back into a shelter.
Okay. Next question. What is the best place to socialize a puppy?
Honestly, everywhere is the best place. I think that you should take a puppy with you everywhere, but you should make their experiences neutral to the environment and not have a lot of people and dogs come up and physically interact with your puppy. But you should take them anywhere and everywhere that you possibly can. So that way things just become boring to them.
Okay, awesome. All right. Biggest mistake a dog owner can make?
Improperly socializing their dog. which is the having your dog meet every single person and every single dog that they see, because that is going to create either aggression, reactivity, or extreme fear. And most of the reactivity cases that I get is from improper socialization.
Yeah. Okay. Dog breeds that first-time owners should run away from.
Malinois.
Malinois? I hear that a lot.
We've been seeing so many of them as dog trainers. We see so many. And, people should not be getting them. They were bred to be aggressive, and then they want these like little like dogs that act like labs. But no, don't get a Malinois, please.
Okay, please, everybody listening, don't do it.
Or a Dutch Shepherd. They're like the same dog essentially, just one's darker with some stripes. But Dutch Shepherd and Malinois, don't do it.
Yeah, oh my goodness, that's so funny. Okay, so that is actually the end of all the questions that I had to ask you. And before we close off, thank you for joining us today. And I would just, for anybody who's listening, where can they find you? So go ahead.
Definitely. So you can find me, obviously, Canine Performance. On Instagram, it's CANINE_performance. If you want to follow along on my personal page, there's some dog stuff there, but also a lot of health and fitness. So if you're looking at getting into health and fitness, that's my personal page. That's just Natalie Dobkins. And then website is just nataliedobkins.com. And yeah, those pretty much like the only places really. I'm mostly on Instagram. TikTok is also Canine Performance, but
okay.
I'm not on there like a lot. I also have a personal TikTok, so.
Okay. Awesome. So that's where, if you guys are looking to expand your knowledge on dog training or get to know more about Natalie, those are all the places that you can find her. I'll also make sure to leave links in the video's description so people can go ahead and click on that right away. But yeah, thank you so much, Natalie. Yeah, that was awesome. I'm really happy. I learned a lot from you, and I think that a lot of people are going to benefit from listening to the podcast.